Hello and welcome, I'm your Code Monk, and in this video I'm going to cover my highlights for the Unity 2019.1 release. Let's begin! So the most important thing to me is that DOTS is finally fully released. If you don't know, DOTS means Data Oriented Technology Stack and is the new name for the Entity Component System, Job System, and Burst Compiler. This is somewhat of a completely new way of writing code and making games with a promise of massively increased performance. It's all about making your games data-driven so they can easily be split into parts to benefit from multi-threading. So you keep writing code in C#, then the Burst compiler takes all of that code and converts it into an extremely fast assembly code, and the end result is hundreds of thousands of objects all running at once with great performance. Now that it's fully out, I'm going to do some research so I can make some videos covering how it works and what benefits you can expect from it. If you're interested in games with lots of different agents, like a massive city builder or a RTS, this should be insanely useful. They also fully released the Megacity project, so if you're interested in learning how DOTS works, this is probably a great example to try to mess around with. The shader graph is also now production ready. Shaders have always been something that I'm interested in, but never really had time to learn how the language works. So for me, the shader graph is definitely something I want to get into, and now that it's production ready, I'm going to do just that. The UI is very intuitive and appears to be just as powerful as if you were writing code. You just create a node, drag the connections, and move everything around. Being able to see a preview of the result is also immensely helpful, since every time I tried to write a shader, the biggest issue was always not knowing exactly what was going wrong. So with the previews, you can see the result at every step of the process. Shaders are wonderful and they can do so many things they almost seem like magic. If you know how to work with them, you have the full performance of the GPU at your disposal. So this is something I'm extremely interested in and will be making some videos on after doing some research. Then there's the Shortcut Manager. This seems quite powerful since you can map any of hundreds of different actions to a simple key press. I'll have to review my own workflow to see what shortcuts I can create to improve it. You can also switch between various groups of keybinds, so you can have certain keybinds for testing, others for level design, others for prototyping, and so on. This is one of those tools that can be immensely powerful if you take the time to adapt it to your own workflow. Then something which seems pretty small but also really cool, which is StackTrace Links. Usually the only thing you can do when you have something on the log is double click and it would open Visual Studio on the line that caused the log. So that means you are limited to the very last line. So if you have many nested function calls, you need to manually go through the stack trace. However, now you can click on each line to take you exactly where the code went through. Since my stack traces are usually pretty big, this will likely be quite a nice feature. Now if you go into Window and Quick Search, you have a very nice new window that can search anything anywhere. So anything you type will automatically search in the current hierarchy inside other scenes, your project folders, and also search in Unity answers. As your project grows, this is immensely useful, since you no longer need to worry about searching in various places one at a time. It's all in just one place. Prefab editing in the editor is also a wonderful thing. Usually my prefabs are pretty simple with just one or two game objects and the components and scripts placed on the root object. So previously you needed to open the prefab in order to modify it, but in 2019 if you want to modify the components on the root, you can do it straight from the inspector. So depending on how you set up your prefabs, this can end up saving you a lot of time and clicks. Then there's also a new way to create a custom editor UI for your components. Keeping with the performance by default mantra, the whole thing is split into the hierarchy, styles, and logic. It seemed like a great way to create custom editors, especially if you already have knowledge of web development and CSS. You can also now show and hide objects in your scene. The difference with just disabling the game object is when you run the game, they will still be enabled. So if your scene is cluttered with lots of objects that are essential, you can keep them enabled and just hide them. Then a couple more interesting things in the changelog. WebGL has been officially upgraded into WebAssembly. This should make web builds more performant. For those of you who run Linux, there is now a preview of the editor. This is yet another thing that helps make Unity an insanely versatile game engine that you can play and now edit on pretty much every platform. There's the Incremental garbage collector, which is still experimental, but it's a move in the right direction to make sure your game is more stable. Instead of clearing garbage all at once, it will be done smoothly over frames so you don't get a massive performance spike. The 2D sprite shape improvements means you can now get better fitting colliders, which is very useful if you use irregular shapes in your games. And the 2D animation improvements also seems to have better performance due to the underlying code using the job system and burst compiler. So all in all, Unity just keeps getting better and better. I really love their approach these past few years of moving towards performance by default. I like making games with lots of units, so to me performance is always a tricky thing, and anything which makes it easier is always welcome. And all of their features targeted towards a more code-free approach, like the shader graph and the VFX graph, are also wonderful for helping people get started. So if you're new to game development and are wondering which engine is best, I would say Unity is a great choice, and they have proven time and time again that they're focused on the long term, which is extremely important if you're thinking of making games as a career. The future is looking bright and I look forward to doing my research so I can do videos on these new exciting features, so stay tuned. Alright, see you next time.